Aaron Kaufman never needed anyone to know his name, and that quiet fact is where this entire story begins. The separation between a man who needed the spotlight and a man who needed the work explains everything that followed his 2018 departure from gas Monkey Garage, and it explains why that departure keeps resurfacing in ways that grow more pointed as years pass. And Kaufman's own work continues to speak for itself. 6 years of automotive fabrication, 60 episodes of reality television, and an arrangement that turned Richard Rawlings into a recognizable name inside custom car culture and cable programming, all while Kaufman stood at the lift and carried the actual load. When he finally walked out, no farewell episode aired, no goodbye scene played for the cameras, and no dramatic exit gave the audience anything concrete to hold. That complete refusal to perform even the ending tells you more about who Aaron Kaufman actually is than any interview he has given since. Growing up in Texas, Kaufman developed a mechanical understanding that trade school doesn't produce, and classroom instruction can't replicate. The ability to fabricate, weld, design, and engineer at a level most professional shops never reach came through years of hands-on practice fueled by genuine obsession with how things actually worked underneath the surface, through an appetite for craft that had nothing to do with fame or any ambition toward a career in front of cameras. That skill set became the structural foundation of Gas Monkey Garage, not simply a supporting element in the operation, but the load-bearing wall, keeping the entire enterprise credible. Strip Kaufman out of that garage, and what remains is a television personality standing near automobiles that nobody is actually building. Rawlings understood exactly what he had, and the arrangement that formed around Kaufman's abilities gave each man a clearly defined role. One handled the salesmanship, the camera presence, the deal-making energy that kept business moving. The other built everything worth watching. For 6 years, real money moved through that garage, and real audiences followed it, drawn in by the transformation of rusted shells into finished custom cars that genuinely looked like something worth driving and owning. Every build that stopped a viewer mid-channel surf, every completed project that elevated fast and loud above the standard cable production chasing ratings, all of that came from Kaufman's engineering instincts and his refusal to walk away from an automobile until the work met his own standard. The show pulled millions of viewers into the world of hot rod culture and custom automotive work, and none of that would have been possible without the hands actually doing the building. The cameras credited Rawlings as the architect throughout, and the financial structure of the operation reflected that framing in ways Kaufman grew progressively less willing to accept as the years accumulated. What wore down the arrangement wasn't a single confrontation or one failed production season. The frustration built steadily across years, fed by two separate problems that reinforced each other until the accumulated pressure became unsustainable. The first was financial, specifically the way money moved through Gas Monkey Garage, and more pointedly the way it failed to reach the people actually performing the fabrication work that made the show worth watching in the first place. Kaufman has described this across scattered interviews, not as a formal accusation with itemized grievances, but as a fundamental imbalance he watched develop over time until rationalizing it became impossible. The second problem lived inside the nature of reality television itself. Building on production timelines rather than his own standards, performing a version of himself shaped for audience consumption rather than working the way his instincts demanded, that tension doesn't resolve over multiple seasons. For someone whose entire identity runs on the integrity of the build, the gap between what the show required and what genuine fabrication demands keeps widening until something gives entirely. Kaufman gave no warning and made no public statement when he finally reached that limit. He left in 2018, and Rawlings offered the public a version describing the split as mutual, framing Kaufman as someone who wanted his own direction, and keeping the Gas Monkey narrative clean enough to remain in motion without disruption. What Kaufman has shared in the years since, delivered across rare interviews granted to people interested in craft more than conflict, draws a more complicated picture without ever structuring it as a direct attack. He doesn't replay arguments or line up grievances for effect. He talks about what matters to him, about fabrication as a standard rather than a performance, about building things designed to last, and the contrast between those values and what Gas Monkey Garage represented becomes visible on its own without any pointing from him. Arclight Fabrication came together exactly the way Kaufman operates. No press releases, no production company packaging the launch for media attention, no network announcement to generate an initial audience. He built an aftermarket parts business centered on the Ford F-100, a classic truck with a devoted ownership community and a genuine shortage of quality components available to them. The F100 pickup holds a specific place inside automotive culture, sitting in the gap between daily driver utility and the kind of classic American design that collectors and builders actively seek out. And Kaufman understood that gap before he ever built a business around it. The ownership community that found Arclight found it because the parts were built correctly, and the fabrication knowledge behind them was genuine, not because a television platform pointed an audience toward it. The business grew through steady, credible, undeniable work that compounded over years, and by most estimates, his net worth reached around $8 million, accumulated without a single camera pointed at him, and grown entirely on the same skills that once made a Discovery Channel show worth tuning into each week. What that trajectory does, when you trace it from the Gas Monkey years through the Arclight build, is reframe every season they spent working side by side in that garage. The credit Rawlings received on camera, the financial structure that benefited him most visibly, the production demands that asked Kaufman to perform a character rather than simply build. None of that prevented Kaufman from walking away and constructing something that grew without any cable television oxygen behind it. What those years clarified in the end was exactly what Kaufman was and wasn't willing to trade his time and skill for, and the answer excluded most of what Gas Monkey Garage had been offering. A 2025 interview produced the statement that landed hardest, and it arrived without any anger behind it. Asked directly whether Gas Monkey Garage belonged among the defining chapters of his story, Kaufman answered no, and he delivered that answer without visible frustration and without the pause that would signal something harder being pulled back from the surface. Gas Monkey came up the way a person recalls a job from their 20s, something that taught them real things, but that they outgrew long before they finally left. Television played no role in what he described as his proudest work. Arclight made the list, along with the parts, the F100 ownership community that trusts what comes out of his shop, and the automotive enterprise built entirely on earned reputation, with no network constructing a platform beneath it. For someone who spent years as one of the most recognized figures in automotive television and reality programming, that answer draws a permanent line between who the camera decided he was and who he actually turned out to be, and drawing it without drama is exactly what makes it feel permanent. Rawlings hasn't engaged directly with what Kaufman has started saying publicly. Deflections have surfaced, passing references to moving forward and general goodwill offered in vague language. Broad acknowledgement that the show existed and that people go different directions. The financial questions raised by Kaufman's account go without any direct response. The characterization of the working environment stays completely unaddressed. Rawlings developed real skill at narrative control across years in reality television, and the approach here reads as calculated. Don't amplify what Kaufman is saying by engaging it directly. Don't give it a larger platform. Let it circulate without picking it up and extending its reach. Whether that approach holds as Arklight's profile continues growing remains its own separate question entirely. 6 years of Kaufman's work made Rawlings a name that custom car culture and reality television audiences recognized and followed. None of that stopped Kaufman from walking out without a safety net, without a television deal positioned to catch him, and without a network offering a shortcut back to visibility. What followed was a return to the only thing that had always stayed consistently true about him. He could build things other people couldn't, and that reputation alone could carry a real business if the work stayed honest. Arclight proved it, not through a sudden burst of broad attention, but through the kind of slow, credible growth that compounds over years into something no argument can dismantle. Kaufman never needed a comeback, because he never actually fell. He stopped letting someone else hold the credit, walked into his own shop as an entrepreneur carrying nothing but skill and a reputation earned across years of real work, and let the automobiles make every argument he chose not to make himself.